Huberman is a PhD neuroscientist and professor at the Stanford School of Medicine in the psychiatry and neurobiology departments. I have seen so many people as of late trying out his protocols, and maybe people have been doing this for a while, and I'm just new to this specific niche and realm. But I've seen a lot of women and men of all ages, but usually around like 20s to 30s, trying out his protocols, specifically his morning routine protocol, and then monitoring how they feel, how they look, any major or minor changes throughout the course of anywhere from 30 days to 3 to 6 months. So, from what I've seen, I haven't seen anyone actually, again, this is, only looking at a handful, maybe 5 to 10 different videos. Um, but I haven't seen anyone really measuring out their biomarkers per se, as much as they are just monitoring how they look and how they feel after doing his protocol for a certain amount of time. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that I am definitely not one to hop on the bandwagon for anything, whether it is a new diet or it is cold exposure or heat exposure or you name it. I'm definitely not one to hop on the bandwagon for things, and definitely not one to solely rely on research, especially since most research has been done on and is still being done on men and or menopausal women, which is very different than a woman in her prime reproductive years. And our physiology is just, it differs, especially when comparing the male physiology to the female physiology. So you can look at, I'm saying you generally speaking, can look at an awesome research study that was actually done pretty well and thorough, but it was done on male rats or male humans. And so it doesn't directly always translate over to women's health. And so when I see anything that is done by the masses and I see like a lot of traction around a specific topic, I love to figure out, I love to do some personal digging, like what is going on? Why are people so drawn to this specific, in this case, routine? And let's kind of break it down. Let's see, like, is this actually valid? And does this actually support women's health and hormonal health and menstrual health and overall reproductive health? Or is this something that is actually detrimental to us? And of course, there's somewhere in between. It's not always one of the extremes. And, in some cases, like today, it's like, how can we actually tweak this and change this up and provide more fluidity so that things can change throughout our menstrual cycle, because so many wonderful, powerful changes are going on during our menstrual cycle, also called and known as the ovulatory cycle and as the infradian rhythm, which is the name of the internal biological rhythm that really governs our 24 to 32 day menstrual cycle. So I always like to take the current research and the current science and the current trend, so to say, of what people are really talking about and focusing on and make it more applicable and tailored to women's health. So if you're interested in that, well, then let's get into it. I want to preface with Andrew Huberman is brilliant. I haven't listened to too much of his work. I've listened to probably, since most of his podcasts are anywhere from like 1 to 2 hours, probably about like 20 hours of his work thus far. And then I've listened to him on a few other people's podcasts, and those are usually like shorter clips, like anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes of him talking about a specific thing that's been made into a YouTube clip. And I truly believe and view him as a very intelligent human being. I will say I listened to a lot of these podcasts and didn't always hear if this was specifically, and when I say this, I mean the topic of the podcast or whatever was being talked about, whether it was a research study or a workout or it was a food or an herb or whatever. I didn't always hear that specification on this is for women or this is for men or this is for both. This is for women in their prime reproductive years. This is for women in menopause. So I personally didn't hear that. Again, I'm sure he has plenty of podcast episodes, maybe not, but I would assume that he has podcast episodes that are specifically tailored to various women's health topics and male health topics. But I will say in like the morning routine one, I listened to so many, but I didn't really hear like a specific, okay, but if you're a woman in her 20s and her 30s and trying to get pregnant, or maybe you already are a mom and you're breastfeeding, and I didn't hear the nuances to those specific situations. And for me, I always provide the nuances, and I really focus on women's health specifically, but I even provide the nuances within that because every single body and human and woman is very, very different at the same time. So what may be really healthy for one person isn't necessarily going to be very healthy for the next person. In fact, something could be really healthy for one person and cause a lot of inflammation and overall stress on the body for another person and actually make them less healthy. So it's really important for me as a clinician and researcher myself to always provide the nuances. I always tell people that I take everything with a grain of potassium. I recommend that you take everything with a grain of potassium because we live in this very digital world where between Instagram and Twitter, which is now called X, and TikTok and YouTube and podcast, and there are just so many outlets to hear other people's opinions on things and what they're doing to support their health. And it can be really overwhelming, even as someone like myself who, again, went to school for natural health and medicine and continues to do research on a daily basis. And I do feel very grounded in myself, and I know what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And given that, I still get overwhelmed sometimes by all of the information that's out there, and I just feel like I'm bombarded with it. So I can't even imagine how stressful it would be if you're 10,000 hours, or, another way to say that, if you're not expert level in these topics and then you listen to a podcast episode. I see how, number one, it would be very easy to just listen to that specific information, whether it's podcast, YouTube, or a social media post, and be like, I'm listening to that. I'm identifying with that. I'm going to do it myself and also tell everyone how amazing it is. And at the same time, I also see how it can be really overwhelming to consume all this information. So it's natural that humans, we want a quick fix, right? Even though that doesn't necessarily always exist, we want that quick fix. We want to just identify with something and kind of go to the extremes with it. So to prevent me from digressing a bunch, let's get into Dr. Huberman's morning routine. And to preface, his routine and my routines are actually more similar than they are not. So this is not going to be an episode where I am bashing Dr. Huberman. Again, I think that he's really brilliant. He really knows his stuff. Could we all be better as practitioners and researchers? Absolutely. Yes. 1,000%, myself included. But I do think that he's really brilliant and that he is making a tremendous and positive impact on so many people's lives. However, again, I just want to provide another perspective to all science, including what he talks about in his podcast and social media, and provide that alternative perspective and make things pertain more to the female physiology and to women's hormones and menstrual cycles. So his routine does seem to be repeated almost daily. So everything that he does pretty much every single day. Whereas we know for myself and for other women, especially those who are menstruating and going through that whole entire ovulatory menstrual cycle, we should really be switching up our morning routine and evening routine and just our days as much as we possibly can, as our biomarkers are also changing throughout our cycle, because we know that so much changes throughout our menstrual cycle, our metabolic function, our cognitive function, our ability to socialize, to think analytically and strategically. Our ATP production, our energy changes, our stress resiliency changes. The menstrual cycle even has impacts on blood glucose levels and overall inflammation in the body. So our menstrual cycles are so important, and it's important that we understand them and that we know how to switch up our nutrition and the way that we move our body, the way that we sleep, and all of these little micro and macro practices that we have throughout the day, throughout our cycle. So first, let me just give a quick rundown of the main parts of his morning routine. And I kind of giggled because I was listening to him on Chris Williamson's podcast, and he was laughing because he's like, sometimes I'll say my morning routine and then people come at me and be like, you didn't mention that you got dressed, right? Or that you went to the bathroom. And I just giggled during that because I feel that sometimes people really just can get super nitpicky in general, but especially with me, of like, well, what about X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, well, of course I go to the bathroom, right? Of course I get dressed in the morning. That being said, I'm going to read like the main parts of his morning routine. Know that yes, he does go to the bathroom. He does get dressed. He does, normal human like things. And I'm not going to get into every single nitty gritty second by second of his morning routine. And I never do that for myself either. That would be really, really exhausting. And I don't think that would be a very fun, I'm even just like picturing that as like a YouTube video or an Instagram video. I don't think you all would really enjoy that. I don't think that would look all that cool. Like, you don't need to watch me washing my dishes or know like exactly when I do that in my morning routine. I don't think that's very beneficial. So his morning routine is he wakes up around the same time every single day, around 6 to 6:30 a.m. Then he gets sunlight, either by sitting outside or via a 10 to 15-minute walk. Then he hydrates with sea salt water, or sometimes he'll use LMNT. Then he mentions that he doesn't look at his emails or social media or really any sort of screen time for the first 60 to 90 minutes of waking up. He waits on his caffeine consumption till about 90 to 120 minutes after waking up. So that's about an hour and a half to 2 hours after waking up. Then he'll drink his first cup of coffee or whatever his caffeine consumption of choice is that day. I know he said he likes yerba mate a lot. Then he gets in his daily workout. He does like strength training, and then he has like an active recovery day. And then once a week, he has a complete rest day where he doesn't even do an active recovery, which he was saying he does like jogging and more cardio on his active recovery days. But that's a very, specific workout routine that he has. He mentioned cold exposure. I didn't quite understand if this was daily, but definitely cold exposure seems to be a big part of his weekly routine. And then he waits to eat his first meal, breakfast, until about 11 a.m., or sometimes he'll push it back to noon. It seems like this kind of depends on how hard he works out as well. Sometimes he'll eat his breakfast right after he works out and then wait an hour and a half or so to then eat lunch. And then he does some work and then he takes a nap. So let's break down each of these individually. I'll provide some nuances, and I don't want to get too nitty gritty into it. Again, this is not to say anything bad about Andrew Huberman. Not bashing him here. Please, no one go and judge him on his social media post. This is what works for him. And he is I believe he's 48-year-old. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what I saw. 48 years old, and he's a man. So what works for him is going to be very different than what works for me as a woman in her prime reproductive fertile years in her 20s. So let's get into number one. He wakes up around the same time every single day, 6 to 6:30 a.m. I'm a little bit iffy about this. I think that there is definitely something to be said for a consistent sleep and wake schedule. I really try myself and recommend for everyone to get into bed and wake up around the same time within like the same 30-minute range every single evening and every single morning. But I will say women need a bit more sleep than men. And commonly, what's thrown out is about like we need 20 minutes more sleep on average than men. Obviously, this number can change a little bit because the amount of sleep that we need is slightly different from person to person, and also changes throughout our menstrual cycle a little bit. But on the topic of our menstrual cycle, during the luteal phase and menstrual phase of our cycle, our ATP production, which is our energy, lowers, and it's not non-existent, obviously, we're still functioning humans, but it is on the decline, as well as our stress resiliency and our blood glucose levels tend to increase in the second half of our cycle. So what is one free way to support all of these things? It's to sleep. So prioritizing sleep is very, very, very important for our overall health and well-being on a more micro level for women's hormonal, reproductive, fertility, overall menstrual cycle health. And I bring this up specifically because it's not Dr. Huberman that is saying you have to wake up at 6 to 6:30 a.m. It's really the videos that I'm seeing on social media, especially by women creators on YouTube and on TikTok and on Instagram, trying his routine verbatim and waking up at that 6 to 6:30 a.m. mark, no matter what time they go to bed at, which many of us are not getting into bed early enough, and no matter where they're at in their cycle. And I want to mention that it is very important to track where you are in your cycle, to always make sure that you're getting, the general guideline is like 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I really say 8 hours of sleep, like get 8 to 9 hours of sleep for optimal hormonal and overall health. And to also monitor where you're at in your cycle, because again, during the luteal phase, an extra 20 minutes of sleep can really, really help boost your overall health and well-being and your cognitive performance throughout the day. So obviously we're doing all of these things, and even like Andrew Huberman's routine, everyone is doing this with the intention of making themselves healthier, right? Because this can, like having a healthy morning routine and evening routine, really sets you up for that day, like in the acute term for that day to feel really great. And then in the long term, like the more that you do this, the healthier that you feel. However, women, again, we may not do the best waking up at 6 in the morning, right? Maybe we need to sleep in until 6:45, 7 a.m., 7:15, right? Obviously, again, this is different between person to person, and it's going to fluctuate a little bit, not by a lot, but a little bit throughout our cycle. So that's why I'm like iffy about that one. I see some female creators on YouTube trying out his routine, and they really push themselves to wake up that early. Again, this can cause a lot of stress on the body in the short term and in the long term. So in conclusion on that, just sleep. Make sure that you're sleeping 8 to 9 hours and that you're waking up feeling rested. That's the ultimate goal. Number 2 is he gets sunlight by sitting outside or by a 10 to 15 minute walk. Yes, I love this. Getting outside, getting sunlight and fresh air and fresh natural light supports our metabolic function, our sleep for the upcoming night, our mood, our cognitive function, our hormone health, our blood sugar and insulin, which falls under the category of hormone health as well, and our overall well-being. It also supports cortisol regulation throughout the entire day, which I think we could all use support on, of all genders and all ages, especially with my ladies who are struggling with any sort of hormone or fertility issue. And don't fret if it's cloudy where you live. Maybe it's perpetually cloudy where you live. I grew up in Chicago. I feel like it was perpetually cloudy from about September, October through May. Or maybe it's just cloudy for a day or a week because you're going through a rainy season or something. Don't fret. You still can get natural light and the benefits from the natural light even on an overcast day. I do recommend that you just stay outside a little bit longer, even if it's like 10 to 15 minutes or so than you would on a sunny day, for example. And sometimes this is a walk that you're getting your sun and your natural light and your fresh air. And sometimes it's just sitting outside. That's really just dependent on you, where you're at in your cycle, how much energy you have. Sometimes I have energy to like wake up and take my dog for a walk around the neighborhood. And other times I'm like, I just want to wrap myself in a blanket and sit on our patio and soak in the sun and hydrate with my water. Getting into the next one that he talks about, number 3, is hydration with sea salt water. Again, sometimes he adds LMNT, which is an electrolyte brand. Yes to hydration, absolutely. I do this in tandem with my outdoor time. So I'll wake up, make my water an electrolyte drink. So I'll do some spring water. I'll add usually a half squeeze of lemon in there, a little pinch of sea salt, and then even better for hormonal health, I'll add in my Soothe tincture to support my adrenal, ovarian, neuro health, and just overall hormonal and also hepatic relating to the liver health. So I'll drink this while I'm sitting outside soaking in my fresh air and fresh light, or I'll drink this if I'm going on that walk around the neighborhood with my dog. So yes, I love that. Number 4, he says no email or social media for the first 60 to 90 minutes. Absolutely yes. I've been a big advocate for this for years now. So this helps to buffer our stress response. This supports our overall mood and cognitive health. It just has so many benefits. You have the entire day to be on social media, to give yourself the first 60 to 90 minutes upon waking of just being disconnected from that really supports your overall mental and emotional well-being, which we know everything is connected, will also support your physiological well-being as well. So other things that you can do during this time, if you're like, but what do I do? Like I like to pass the time on social media. You can connect with a loved one And sometimes this may be calling, which is okay. Like sometimes I will kind of break the screen rule, for example, if I want to call my mom or call, my little baby nieces and nephews. That's kind of breaking the screen rule a little bit because I'm using a phone to do that. But I think the most important is that you're not on social media right away. Instead, and not on social media, not on your emails, not working, and instead just doing things that really nourish the nervous system, such as connecting with a loved one again in real life or virtually, journaling, reading, research. This is a great time to do some research for my fellow researchers. Also, a great time to work out. We'll get into working out and if I think you should do it on an empty stomach or not in a little bit. This is also a time you can cook and eat your breakfast and then also clean and etc. There are so many things to do. An hour and a half goes by really, really fast in the morning, as most people know. I feel like, 20 minutes in the morning goes by so much faster than 20 minutes in the middle of the day. So that's another topic for another time about our perception of time. Okay, and then he gets into caffeine consumption about 90 to 120 minutes after waking up. Yes, I love this. It's super important for us to delay our caffeine consumption, especially for women, and to wait to have our caffeine until after breakfast, which I believe he is consuming his caffeine on an empty stomach. I don't agree with that for women, but I do agree with him in that we should delay our caffeine consumption to an hour and a half to 2 hours after waking up. So I love that. Next, he has his workout. He is very consistent with his workout routine and it works for him. Women, however, I recommend that we cycle sync our workouts. This is best for our metabolic function, our hormones, our cycles, and overall health and well-being. So we have different exercises that are recommended for the menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and the luteal phase. And I have plenty of resources for you all on that if you want to learn more about those specific workouts. I have plenty and I'll link them all up in the show notes of this episode. So take all of this with a grain of potassium though, because regardless of what phase you're in, even if you're in your ovulatory phase where you're supposed to be more energized, if you wake up and you feel tired, take a rest day. Always prioritize rest days. Also, I will say he did mention that he liked to be caffeinated for his workouts and listen to loud music while working out and just really get a really good workout in. Even just hearing that kind of made my heart race. So everyone is very different. If you are someone who is working on your adrenal and thyroid issues and your stress resiliency, and you're trying to overall just add more calm into your life for your overall health and well-being, maybe you don't do a workout on an empty stomach, uber caffeinated, and listening to really loud music. Maybe you do yoga and you eat breakfast or at least a little snack beforehand, or you do Pilates or bar, and maybe you're listening to bilateral beats or just anything other than I don't know if he's listening to heavy metal, but I just pictured heavy metal when I was listening to him talk. And I just kind of giggled because I was like, that would so not work for me and so not work for a lot of women that I work with one-on-one. Okay, next, he does cold exposure on most mornings. I'm a bit skeptical of cold exposure in general across the board. I especially don't recommend it for women who are struggling with their stress response and stress resiliency or struggling with thyroid issues. A great way to know if you are without really necessarily running thyroid stress mood metabolism test are to actually just test your basal body temperature, which I recommend for all women to do so we can track our overall menstrual cycle and confirm ovulation. If you're lower than 97 degrees Fahrenheit, you are struggling with your internal body temperature. It's a bit lower. This could be due to thyroid issues and or adrenal issues. Usually they kind of work hand in hand. So cold exposure is just not something that I recommend for women who are experiencing that at all. There are definitely better, safer, and calmer ways to regulate your nervous system and to increase brown fat and to increase metabolism, dopamine, etc., than jumping into a freezing tub of ice cold water. Those are just some of the reasons and benefits why people do love cold exposure. Again, I think that there's compelling research out there to show the benefits of cold exposure for different reasons. Again, I think a lot of this was done on men and not so much menstruating women. I've seen more often than not women who are doing super stressful things to their bodies, such as cold exposure, tend to experience anovulatory cycles, meaning that they skip ovulation and their hormones and their cycles are not regulated and they're out of balance. A lot of my personal colleagues who are women as well and focus most of our research and time and energy around women's health are not the biggest fans of cold exposure. It increases adrenaline and noradrenaline and causes more stress on the adrenals and thyroid, and again can cause hormone and cycle issues. So I prefer facial ice baths breath work, barefoot grounding. Again, it depends on what type of benefit you are going for with the cold exposure. And then, if it was for your nervous system and stress resiliency, doing the breath work. If it was for, perhaps it was to have a little bit tighter skin, clearer skin, do like a facial ice bath. Again, it kind of just depends on what you're going for, because the ice bath does show to have various benefits on the body. Again, I think more so on the male body and physiology, but it just depends on what you're going for. And again, there are better ways to do that in a calmer, safer way. And then he eats breakfast around 11 a.m. and noon. I recommend women to eat breakfast within 30 to 60 minutes of waking up to buffer the high cortisol levels in the morning, to provide sustained energy, support blood sugar levels throughout the day, and support the nervous system. If our body thinks that we are in starvation or famine mode, it will downregulate reproductive functioning. Then he works, and then sometimes he takes a nap or do some yoga nidra. So, in conclusion, I really do love his morning routine. At the end of the day, what works for one person and even what works for an incredibly accomplished and wise neuroscientist may not be the best for you, especially considering that Dr. Huberman is a 48-year-old male. And I'm guessing if you're listening to this, knowing my demographic and my community, you're probably not fitting that exact demographic. So here is how I would recommend to alter his morning routine to better support your hormones in your menstrual cycle. And again, take everything that I say with a grain of potassium, take what resonates with you, and leave what doesn't. As simple as that. So imagine this. If you want to close your eyes and really imagine this, I recommend to do that. But if not, just continue to do what you're doing. If you're driving or walking, please don't close your eyes. So first, we wake up naturally if possible, or we use a wake light to slowly wake ourselves up naturally. I personally have really moved away from using alarm clocks because they just wake me up in this state of urgency and stress and elevated heart rate, and I'm just not a fan. So use a sleep wake light, or there's even, I don't know the name of the brand, but there's an alarm clock bracelet that detects where you're at in your sleep cycle to know when is the best time to actually wake you up. And then you set the time that you want to wake up. So let's say you're like, I want to wake up at 7 a.m. Then it will figure out in that, hour before 7 a.m. when is the best time to actually wake you up. And it wakes you up by gently buzzing your wrist. So look into that if that sounds interesting to you, or look into the sleep wake light. That is if you don't like just naturally wake. A lot of people just naturally wake up around the same time every single day. So for me, I usually do wake up naturally, like a few minutes before 7 in the morning, sometimes 7:15. But obviously there are days that we need to be awake by certain times. So using something like the two options that I mentioned is a great alternative. Then we tongue scrape and oil pull. And if you don't want to oil pull with sesame oil or coconut oil, you can also just use a simple herbal mouthwash. I have a recipe for that on the Peace Love Hormones website. I've posted on my social media a few different times. And then you could also just do salt water. Some people just do a pinch of sea salt in some warm water and swish that around, gargle it a little bit, which also supports your vagus nerve and stimulates it a little bit. Spit it out and then tongue scrape. Then you make your morning hydration tonic with spring water, my herbal soothe, or another hepatic and hormone supportive tincture, lemon, and sea salts. Then you bring that tonic with you as you go outside and get fresh light and sun if the sun is out, as well as fresh air. And whether you want to go for a walk or just sit and soak it all in is totally up to you and dependent on where you are in your cycle and your overall energy on that given morning. Then you'll go back inside, you'll make a nourishing breakfast, or little asterisks here, or make a snack and go to your workout. Again, depending on where you're at in your cycle, you may want breakfast, not just a snack before working out. Also, no matter when you work out, no matter where you're at in your cycle, your movement should be tailored to reflect where you are in your cycle. And I repeat, I may sound like a broken record here, but I repeat, we should not be doing the same thing day in and day out when it comes to our workouts. Then, once you are nourished and you move your body in whichever way fits your unique physiology at any given point during your menstrual cycle, then you can shower, get ready for the day, and go to work. The more that us women understand our hormones and our cycles, as well as our unique physiology, the better of a lens that we can view and filter mainstream health advice, with the ultimate goal of being the healthiest, most radiant versions of ourselves.